Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Diversity Connector podcast. This is Gertrude Mache, and it gives me great pleasure to share with you my very first guest. When I met this amazing woman, I felt like I was meeting a sister from another mother. She walks the walk, she talks the talk, she's all about social impact, and as you know, the Diversity Connector is a social impact project where we are creating massive change for women in marginalized communities. So, my first guest, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi, Gertrude. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on here today. My name is Gillian Turnbull, and I'm also based in the beautiful land of the Kulin Nation in Nairn, Melbourne. My journey is a little bit of an interesting one. I was raised in the west of Scotland, and I've had a couple of, I would describe, quite pivotal moments to take me from the west coast of Scotland to Melbourne. All started when I was 17, and I had the opportunity to travel to India with a group of young people from across Scotland to participate in a program. The program was designed to expose us as new people about to start university to a different culture, a new way of life, and in this instance, quite extreme poverty. And the idea behind the program was to encourage us as we embarked on our careers to think through how we might use our skills, our knowledge, our future career endeavours to contribute to community. So from a very young age, I had people around me encouraging me to think about what my role should be in growing community development. So I travelled to India, had probably one of the most incredible experiences of my life. I turned 18 in the Himalayas. I went camping up there. I was hiking. I worked in a Tibetan refugee village, and we had a private audience with the Dalai Lama. So I came back with a renewed sense of I was getting ready to study international business with modern languages. How do I use this to drive social good? I was fortunate enough to get an internship with United Nations after university, purely because I was really interested in seeing how I might get involved in international development. But the second pivotal moment happened when I did a master's in international relations and development studies. My advisor, he was an economic development professor, gave me the best advice. He ultimately said, if you want to work in development, you have to bring something of value. Get yourself some skills, get some technical knowledge, get something that would be of real value to the countries where you want to go so you can actually create fundamental change. Since then, I have always strived to combine the business skills, my technical skills, and my commercial acumen with creating social impact. So I worked in Deloitte for a couple of years to get my business backing, to develop my technical skills, to really start to develop my problem solving, my strategic thinking skills. And then I was fortunate enough to go to the Clinton Foundation because they believed in the value of applying business principles to address social issues at scale. Their view is a supply chain for antiretroviral drugs is no different from a supply chain for Coca-Cola. So after that, I moved to work for Tony Blair's Africa Governance Initiative in various countries. And again, this idea was, how do you apply principles of capability building, of planning, of forecasting to take a scalable approach to creating meaningful change. My move to Australia came after 7 years in the field, where I felt I needed to have a bit of a semblance of a more routine like life. I missed my family, I missed friends, and I really wanted to settle. So when I moved to Melbourne, I was fortunate enough to work for a wonderful non-profit consultancy, Social Ventures Australia Consulting, where again, we took strategy consulting toolkit and worked through how we might apply these problem-solving tools to help social enterprises to scale, non-profit organizations to become more financially viable, and really explore how commercial companies might contribute to driving change. I've now found myself in government because I think there's a real opportunity and an important role that policy can play in actually driving meaningful change, but always thinking through how can I apply the skills I have developed and grown along the way to really create this community change.
So thank you so much for sharing. It sounds like you've had an incredible journey and very multifaceted career journey. So can you share your journey across these various sectors, such as government, nonprofits, international agencies, and how these experiences have shaped your approach to social impact and community development?
Sure. Yeah, I've been very fortunate to have lots and lots of different experiences. And I think for me, I look back and I can't believe actually where I've had the opportunity to work. One of the big things that struck me from working across all of these sectors, and the thing that I've actually continued to develop and hone, is all of these roles have required community engagement. And over time, I've felt myself get better at community engagement. When I worked in international development for the Clinton Foundation and also Tony Blair's Africa Governance Initiative, we were guests in a country. So it was very, very important to remember that we were there as guests. It was a privilege. We were privileged to be able to work there. So engagement with all key stakeholders was really important, because we were working to meet their needs and support their priorities. And I think over time, I find it really interesting just to be mindful of how I adapted my approach to community engagement to reflect their customs, how they like to work. Because I'm in the west of Scotland. I talk quite fast. I move quite fast. And I needed to be very aware that actually I'm a guest in this country. I work to your style. And it was a really important lesson, because when I moved to work for the nonprofit sector in Australia, we did lots of community engagement with remote communities. I had an absolute privilege of engaging with the Martu mob up in the Pilbara, and this was the most phenomenal experience. But listening, engaging, working alongside them was absolutely core to that project. And it was, again, similar to working in international development. I was a guest. I was invited to join them. I was invited to join their organization, and I needed to, it was really important that I was able to engage and to listen. And I think that's something that all of my experiences have shaped how I now listen and approach my work, because we don't have the answers. And it's interesting because your immediate reaction is to talk. And I know when I first moved to international development, to my first country, I wanted to prove myself. So I wanted to prove that I was of value and that I therefore knew an answer, because I was there to help. And I was very keen on, I can help. And it's taken me a long time to realize that you have to start by asking lots of questions to fully understand the situation, the context, the problem you're trying to solve for before you offer solutions. Because otherwise you're just some other well-meaning individual that's not going to actually create any change.
So let's talk a little bit about language skills and multicultural sensitivity. How have you used your multilingual skills in English, French, and Spanish to facilitate your work in diverse communities, both here in Australia and internationally?
I mean, I cannot talk more highly about the importance of having language skills. I cannot emphasize enough what difference it makes. One of the reasons that I was actually given the opportunity to work in both Jamaica and Haiti was because of my language skills. When we were in Haiti, every person in my team spoke French. And that made me very proud, because for me, it showed that we respected that we were in a different country, working with different cultures, and they worked in a different language. So I always question, why should we assume that everyone speaks English? Because when we're in their country, and it made me very proud that every single member of my team was Francophone. And what I found really important was when we were designing programs or implementing different initiatives, being able to communicate with the people on the ground who were actually the ones delivering the program was crucial to its success. Like, how can you possibly design something alongside people if you can't communicate with them? Or you're expecting them to communicate in their second or third language, and try to explain themselves in a way that they're not massively comfortable. I found we got the best results because we were able to communicate in a common language that was French. And I just think that was hugely important, because it also engendered trust. From a very, very early on stage, we were able to build trust, because you can have the chat, you can build that relationship, and you can make them feel comfortable that you were able to understand them. Because there's always that concern, you're working in your country and someone comes along and you have to communicate in their language.
Yes.
It doesn't sit right with me. And I think even so, that was hugely important for me. And even when I moved to Rwanda, with some people in Rwanda, depending on where they grew up, some of them did speak French as a first or second language. And even them realizing that I could also communicate in the language they felt most comfortable, that was made a big deal. You could see that people, relaxed, they opened up to you. And I feel it's a really important part of communication, is to demonstrate that you respect another country's culture and another country's language. And I did my best to learn a few words in Kinyarwanda, which is the Rwandan, one of the Rwandan national languages. And I learned how to order my coffee. And every morning I'd go down to the coffee shop and ask for the same coffee order in Kinyarwanda. And the guy behind the counter, he obviously knew me. He knew my coffee order, but every morning I would ask for it in Kinyarwanda, and he'd smile and he would give it to me and he'd have a wee laugh. And I think even those tiny wee things made such a difference, because it showed you were demonstrating that you recognized, you valued, you celebrated the culture that they had. And it was it was a good feeling. I felt like I connected better. It was massive. I was actually, I think since I've come to Australia, it's not been quite as important, mostly because they're European languages and we're very far. Yeah. But I do. Yeah, it's an important, and I mean, you speak multiple languages, Gertrude, coming from your area, and I think it's an important part of culture and identity, and I think it's nice to do that.
It's an immediate. It breaks down the barriers immediately. Yes. Even if you just learn how to say hello and just the greetings in that language, people really appreciate your effort.
Exactly. Thank you. How are you?
Exactly. So now let's talk a little bit about creating sustainable change. What strategies do you employ to create sustainable change in vulnerable communities? And how do you measure the long-term impact of these initiatives?
Oh, I don't know. That is such a challenging discussion. I think this is a massive question. I think I think about this a lot when we consider vulnerable communities and how we create sustainable change, because a lot of the time, if I go back to my initial view, is what are the skills and the knowledge and experience that I can bring to support them to address the problems that they are already aware of. And I think that is absolutely crucial for communities. The communities will already know what the biggest challenges are that they are facing. If you think about the collective impact initiative that was being undertaken in Burke, which had very, very high recidivism rates, there was an initiative that focused on trying to reduce the number of young people that were reincarcerated after they left. And this program was extremely successful because the community identified the problem. They understood the people affected, and they understood the potential strategies to address the issue. So for me, a lot of the time, if you're sitting outside community, I believe you should go in, listen, understand what do you believe are the key issues, and then explore what's the unique role that I can play in supporting you on that journey. Yes. And I think that's absolutely core, is you look at yourself and see, how can I contribute? What can I bring? Is there someone else doing what I do already? And if so, is there a unique role that I can play? Perhaps it's fundraising. Do you know someone? Is it my networks? Is it my connections? And again, it's that sense of ownership, capability building. Yes. When I worked in Rwanda, there was a big discussion around having counterparts who you would build the capability of so they could then take on your role. And that's the same idea as, if you've got, perhaps it's a lack of skills that the community doesn't know how to implement a solution. Can I help with that? I think that's how you would create sustainable change: community ownership and community buy-in. And community-led, all the great principles of place-based.
You're also ensuring that people don't become dependent on the aid or the assistance that you are providing. A lot of times, social impact organizations create dependency. So in grooming and putting in place a replacement for yourself is just a powerful way of empowering people, to the maximum. So that's just wonderful to hear.
Spot on. And it also limits the sustainability of anything that you do. If you leave and the program collapses, then you haven't done your job properly.
I love that. That is just awesome. It reminds me of a project I got involved in Zimbabwe when I was about 23 years old. We had a water and sanitation project. It was run by the Lutheran Church, and we were sinking boreholes and building Blair toilets in the rural parts of Zimbabwe. We had a budget of $55 million over these 5 years. And after 5 years, that project fell flat. It failed completely. The women in these communities boycotted the boreholes. They refused to use the borehole for water. So when we sat down and we did an evaluation, we found that we did things without their consultation. So the first thing they asked us was, why didn't you ask us what we wanted? So although women were traveling 5-10 kilometers to get water, it wasn't a priority for them. What they wanted was a school for their children to get an education. They wanted a clinic. So we missed the priorities for this community. The other thing we discovered was that where they went to fetch water, there was a social function to the watering hole. So in Zimbabwe, most women live in the village with the children. Your husband works in the city and comes home once a month, once every 6 months. So you are alone in this little hut in the middle of nowhere with your 5-6 children. And the only time you get human contact with other adults is when you take your bucket, you go to the well to get the water. So had we asked and listened, we could have built more boreholes that were communal. Into how women were using the watering hole as a source of information. You find out who's dead, who's dying, who's had a baby. If you find your husband at home, You get your bucket and you go for a walk.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was my first experience in working in this field, and it was a real eye opener.
Yeah, I remember being in Jamaica and being in an HIV clinic, and we were rearranging furniture to make more space for patients. And we were in this one room that was designated the HIV room, and I had this giant desk in it, huge desk and chair. And we'd said, well, this desk is too big for this room. Let's get it out of here. And we were told you can't move that because that was a donation from a funder who wanted to support HIV, and therefore it needs to go in this room. They didn't need this giant desk, but they felt that they had to have it in that room because it was from a funder. And in fact, we see that a lot in international development. The funders have priorities they want to support, so they give the stuff they want to give, even though that might not be what they needed. And it's a challenging one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. There's still a lot of work to be done in this space.
Very much so.
Now let's talk about balancing impact with sustainability. In your role as a management consultant, how do you help organizations to balance the need for social impact with sustainability and growth?
It's such a big question. It's a really important one. And normally when I think about opportunity questions, one, what is the potential for impact of an opportunity? So does it align? If you have a theory of change, it'll help you contribute to your outcomes. The next question is, will it meet a community need? So if you're operating in a community, you have to ask yourself that by expanding, creating a new product, offering a new service, is there a gap in the community that you will be filling if you deliver this service? Third question is, does it align with your current skills and capabilities? So you don't want to start to grow if you don't have the skills, capabilities, governance structure inside your organization and do not have the appetite to invest in that either. So there's a big question around what does your current operating model look like, and will that allow it to grow? And the fourth question is, what is the commercial viability of this opportunity? So how are you going, at a certain point, will you break even? At a certain point, will you be able to make money? What's your appetite for risk and all of this? How much are you willing to lose over the next 3 years to determine whether or not this is a potential opportunity? And if we encourage organizations to consider each opportunity through these 4 lenses, you'll then be able to see which opportunities are genuinely allow you to grow, but to remain actually viable. Because what we find a lot of is depending on the business model, not all organizations have the ability to scale or want to scale. So there's this question around, do you diversify? Do you want to just get really good at what you do? Do you want to focus? Do you want to focus on a small number of people, but focus on supporting them really, really well? And this then all goes to, what's your vision? What's your mission? And I always encourage organizations to have a really strong, clear 5-year strategy that ultimately lays out exactly what they want to achieve, what their roadmap is, how they'll know they'll be successful, and then what is their governance model to underpin that? And is the board supportive of them? Because if the board isn't supportive, chances are it's not going to happen.
It's not.
So, big question. It's not an easy process.
It definitely isn't. And those are really good points to remember when it comes to scaling. So what are your lessons from your United Nations experience? What key insights did you gain from your work in the UN that you now apply to your current role?
So my time at the UN, I did an internship, and it was my first ever kind of experience in the world of work. So I had the best time. I was so excited to be there. I worked in Geneva in the Palais des Nations, and it was the most exciting experience to walk down the Avenue of Flags every morning to get to my office. So I was very, very impressionable. I already knew that I wanted to work in the space of international development. And for me at the time, the UN represented the the pinnacle of where I wanted to get to. I
Yes.
admit, I think if I was to go back now, my experience would probably be a little bit different because I bring with it the last 18 years of knowledge and understanding. But at the time, I was so, I found it such an incredible place to think about all of the different countries, all the different cultures and people and backgrounds, all trying to work towards a greater good. And
Yeah.
whilst I appreciate now, looking back, that this is quite an idealistic situation, and there are lots of people who don't necessarily believe in the value of the United Nations. But putting that
Mm.
aside for now, I was 24 when I was there, and at
Okay.
24, I really, really believed that bringing people together with so many different backgrounds and views, we could work together to really drive massive change and to create peace. I was so excited about that. And I still, looking back now, I'm really glad I had that experience because
Mm.
whilst I perhaps have a bit more cynicism now, I still think that I still like what it stands for. We can
Right.
solve a social problem if you bring together people from different backgrounds, different viewpoints, different experiences, and all focus on the same problem. And you
Yeah.
see that a lot when you think about co-design, or use kind of co-design where you bring people together and you all look at, or human-centered design, where you all look at an issue from different perspectives and everyone's bringing their own skill set to try and solve a problem. And I think about that from a UN perspective, where you're bringing all these different people with different skills in different countries together to see how you deal with big problems. And even now in community development, recognizing that everyone comes from different perspectives, but we're all focused on the same issue.
Yes.
That it's like we many United Nations in a community. That's a terrible analogy. You
Oh,
can cut that bit out. I don't know if that was a
oh,
very good answer, Gertrude. It was such a long time ago.
oh my gosh. Yeah, that's just fascinating. So let's talk about now challenges in community development. What are
Mm,
some of the most significant challenges that you face in driving community development, especially in diverse and vulnerable populations?
mm. For me, I personally always see two main challenges that are pretending to fully understand the challenges
Mhm.
that people face and have faced in their lives. I can go into a community, work with a group of people and be empathetic and be open to recognize that they have experienced barriers and hardships or situations. But I think it's very important to not to pretend that you can fully understand, having not had that lived experience. And I think it's a very
Right.
important fine line to recognize that I can't imagine what it must be like to be a migrant woman who is escaped, doesn't speak English as her first language, when engaging with people that you don't pretend to fully understand, because
Yes.
you don't experiences from having lived through something.
Mhm.
The second challenge I think is around how do you then provide opportunities to ensure they have a voice and are allowed to share their opinions. I go to, there's lots and lots of networks and community meetings and engagement and consultations which take place across Melbourne, but often
Mhm.
those whom we're setting out to support are not provided sufficient opportunity to have a voice. And this is
Yes.
often the case for lots of population groups who are traditionally not allowed to be heard. And again, I think through to young migrant women who've never really been given the opportunity to share their voice. And then we turn up to meetings and we consult and we talk about the importance of engaging with them and including them. But how do we make sure that they have the voice, and we bring people we bring people to the table who are not traditionally heard.
Mhm.
I feel like they're often underrepresented, and I think it's a challenge to get their voice brought to the table, but it's something that is extremely important.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. And that's really why I created the Her Story Circle movement,
Yeah.
is to empower more women of migrant background, refugee backgrounds, to learn how to use their voice when they're in the workplace and different organizations. That's really
Yes.
important.
Yeah. And to also see what they have as a gift or a power. And this sounds really daft, but I always got a bit uncomfortable with my accent when I first moved to Australia. People made fun of it. They said I spoke funny, etc., etc. And I got quite embarrassed speaking up. I used to sit in meetings and plan what I was going to say, so I didn't fluff it up. And I was speaking to a storyteller one night, he was a professional storyteller who coached people. And I made this comment how I was quite nervous speaking in public. And he said to me, you should see your accent as a gift. So see it as something unique that you bring to a presentation that immediately captures people's attention and play on it. And I think that a lot about when we think about women who maybe feel a bit nervous because they sound different or look different or never had been in a position where they're allowed to share their voice. Their lived experience, they should, be proud of and bring it and see it as a gift, because they've got so much important knowledge to share and impart. And I love the fact that you're creating a space where people can feel safe sharing their views, having their voice heard. Because there's so many things that benefit from having multiple views in the room. And it's time to hear it's time to hear more from women.
I love that. And that is so true. That is so
Yes.
true, man.
Good on
Okay,
you.
so what about, how do you see the role of social enterprise evolving in addressing social issues, and what makes them effective?
I love social enterprises. I think social enterprises have a huge role in addressing social issues, primarily because the leaders, the CEOs, the founders that set them up have a genuine passion and care for the issues they're focusing on. And that for me makes a difference. If I think about all the social enterprise I've worked with, the key factor that I have seen consistent across all those that are successful is the leadership. The leadership are focused, they are determined, and they are driven because they've chosen the issue they want to address. So they have stood up and said, we want to address this issue and we're going to do everything we can to support that. And that for me is a phenomenally important element of addressing social issues. And what's exciting with there's a payment by outcomes pilot being undertaken by White Box Enterprises at the moment. They're looking into it's a pilot to demonstrate the effectiveness of social enterprises in addressing employment challenges. And the results are essentially demonstrating that social enterprises, particularly work integrated social enterprises, are a hugely effective way of getting vulnerable people into jobs. And having this evidence base is massive because it essentially backs up what social enterprises have been saying for years, which is we know the cohort, we know we've got specialists who can work with the people, we know their needs, we have trust, we can create a space for them, we do it better. Let us do it for you. So I think the role of social enterprises is going to get much bigger. And because it's becoming mainstream. More and more people are familiar with the language. They know what a social enterprise is. The numbers are growing every week. New ones are emerging. There are more and more opportunities for you to buy everything from a social enterprise if you chose. And I think as people explore, more people spend their money with them, the social enterprises have the potential to scale, to get bigger, and therefore to expand their reach. And that is very, very exciting. I
love that. So how do you engage and work with corporates to create meaningful change And what challenges do you encounter in this process when it comes to
Mm.
corporate involvement in social justice?
I mean, corporates as well have got such an important role to play. And I think this is where I find the sector really interesting because it's so multifaceted.
Yes.
Corporates, I feel like corporates can do. There's a number of strategies that corporates can explore. They can choose to look at all of their internal business services and procure from a social enterprise. For example, where do you get your stationery from? Where do you get your cleaning done? Who looks after your plants? Who does your catering? Who provides your coffee in the morning? They're all opportunities where corporates can spend money buying their traditional services with a social enterprise. They can also then think more broadly to explore who are the people that I want to specifically support, and how can I as an organization support them? And that's when they can become a bit more strategic. For example, they might start to design a product or a service to specifically meet the needs of a cohort. Some of the financial services companies, the banks, they are starting to provide products that are targeted at vulnerable young people who might be at risk of homelessness because they want to provide financial services. So they have a big role in being strategic. And then you have the traditional corporate social responsibility elements where you have the volunteering day, you have the sponsorship, you have the branding. And I think for me, corporates need to take this portfolio approach to how they play, because there is a role for it all. So they've got the role of spending their money internally, the role of creating products and services that can meet specific needs based on their unique offering. And then you've got the community grassroots initiatives that attract their employees and create a good working environment for employees. The challenges, I think, for corporates is really, again, I think in threes. For me, it's threefold. One, it is working through where do we want to support and how best can we do it. There's lots of when I've worked with large corporates in the past, they're already doing some stuff. Sometimes, giving out small grants. So there's a big question. The big challenges they've explored is how do they decide what to stop doing and what to keep doing? Because a lot of the time they're giving out wee grants to small organizations and they're feeling good about it. But there's a big question around, should you actually just be combining all of your money into 2 grants and actually doing good? So how do you decide what to keep doing and what to stop doing? There's also a question around really challenging, is this making a difference? I would question whether or not a volunteer day for all your staff is the best thing to do. And how do you, so there's a balance between, is this for our employees or is this for driving social impact? And I think the third challenge is that balance between they've still got to satisfy a bottom line. So how do you get that challenge? Similar to the question you asked earlier about balancing financial growth with social impact. They face the exact same challenge. If they believe that they want to support a certain cohort or a certain issue, how do you make sure that you can do so in a way that's financially viable and still allows them to grow as a commercial organization? And that's a constant balancing act. Not unsurmountable, but it's definitely requires careful consideration. But what's exciting about a lot of corporates is they have extremely smart, hardworking people in their organization. And we've seen workforces evolve where new employees want to get involved. They want to do more good for community. They want to be able to participate. So corporates have got a huge workforce at their disposal to really drive change. It's just a matter of working out for themselves where they want to play and how they can best play.
So thank you so much for your work. Thank you for the inspiration.
Thank you, Gertrude, for your work. This is wonderful. I'm so delighted to be a part of this. This is great.
This is why we're connecting and collaborating so we can make a difference in the world. So this has been just absolutely awesome for me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gertrude.
Thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. This is what the Diversity Connector is all about. I will be bringing movers and shakers, speakers, inspiring entrepreneurs to share their experiences in diverse situations around the world. We want to energize, motivate, and inspire you to be the change you want to see in the world. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. And that's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant global conversation. My name is Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you heard today is a thread in the rich fabric of our shared humanity. As you step into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by simply looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep learning, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast, signing off. Stay curious, stay open, and stay connected.